So this is about where kind of that pressure that comes to this island kind of ends, because it gets real deep with water in here during the season pretty often. There's usually a good sign coming up this side, way better than the other side. As you can see, this rub is from last year. And I usually go on rubs, I go by height percent. So I would say that that's probably a 3-year-old buck. You know, if you start getting around here, it's usually 2-year-old, and below here is like 1.5. And I don't go by the height. A lot of guys will go, you know, it's a 6-foot rub. That's just tine sitting. What really is important is the center of where the fur rubs, because that's dictating the height of the back of the buck, which dictates the age class. I know it's not 100% accurate, but it is fairly accurate. You start seeing rubs when they're up this high to center, it's almost always a mature buck. 1.5-year-old bucks just aren't rubbing up that high. So I don't really go by diameter as much. I mean, I can remember a few different occasions when I was hunting near big rubs and had little tiny bucks in the rubble. In one case, I remember I was a kid, but it still sticks in my mind really well that I found these rubs on these pine trees that were like this big around, and I'm like, oh, there's got to be a monster coming in here, and I'm sitting over those rubs, and a spike bug came in and started working them. So the diameter doesn't always tell you everything. The height is really important to me. This area has a couple big rubs, and that would catch my attention as to why they're there, because we're close enough to bedding, obviously, and not sitting on food. Well, a little bit with the old, but they're coming from somewhere to do this. And if I looked at a map, I would see there's an island out here, and another island out there, and this comes to a point over here. And this still seems like it's really close to the parking lot, but that particular island I've had a lot of success on. But that little woodlot there is probably the most pressured area in here, and this obviously gets pressured. I mean, I don't know if you guys noticed it, but sticking out of that tree there as we're walking by, I noticed a screw tail. And I've seen guys hunting in climbers right here, and the other stands on this point. But it seems like those deer will walk through these people spots at night knowing that it's safe. They just won't go near it during the daylight. They just don't come through here. But that area right there I've had some luck on. On our way over there, we can look, there's a pretty decent bed spot right underneath that bush that the last couple of years has held a buck. Let's take a walk over to the one.
Stalking right under there.
But one thing that's unique about this, if you look at this stuff when it's rubbed, if you scratch it, it's bright orange. And even if you get it in November, it'll still be pretty orange. So if it's this gray and it's starting to get mold on there, as Eric likes to say, that's from early season. So that's probably right around September, which would probably be in line with when I would think a buck would steady. If you look at this one, I mean, this is this year's rub too, but look at how old that looks. I mean, that is all dried up, and obviously these are, whatever was bedding here was here really early in the season. So if this was a spot I would hunt, I'd be concentrating on early in the season, probably when those acorns are dropping, hunting right where this guy's hunting. But when I look at something like this, I look around and say, where are the rest of the beds? I don't see a lot. Do you? This is it, and they're not that worn. So the chances of hitting this right are pretty slim. We do have a time frame, and if it was the best you had, okay, it probably ain't worth, you know, it ain't that bad of a thing to try. But with that said, this wouldn't really turn me on that much, even though it's got some rubs in it. Even if these were glowing, I would want to find a cluster of this, a cluster of bedding, you know, more of it. Okay. So this will fool some people, especially if you get that bed worn in, and these rubs are a little more fresh, right? Here has actually been pretty good to me. I shot a big buck here, pretty big 8-pointer, and back when I used to guide, I had a client shot a real big buck here, and this spot still seems to produce, although I only hunted it once every probably couple of years. I try to hit this on certain years. Can you guess when? 8 points? Yeah, usually when those oaks are dropping, I like to hit it then. Because it puts those deer right here when they come up out of this point. There's 2 major spots that come out of here. They come out of that island over there, or they come out of this island over here. This island's hard to see because it's got dead ash. But mixed in there is some dogwood and stuff. But there's 2 heavy trails that come into here and meet in here. So when I first started hunting, this was really a problem because one of the trails came out over there, one of them over here. These deer would always go that way, and those deer would always go that way. And it was like you get one or the other, no doubt they'd always come on the other side. But now, every time the snow comes in real heavy and lays down cattails and stuff, the trails seem to change. And the last time the trail started coming out right here, and it stayed there, and this one comes out right here. So you kind of hit them both from right here now. But this has been good. I mean, it's last light, but you get these deer, even though I'm going right through hunters right there, and right through hunters over there. I'm still seeing good bucks here. Now, I only hunt it once every couple of years, but I've had good opportunities in those few times I've hunted. So probably 1 out of 4 times that I've hunted this, I've seen a decent animal. One of them was a giant 8-pointer I was hunting one time that was probably close to Boone and Crockett, and he actually wasn't bedded on the island, which we've had a couple times, but he fed just off the point here. He got up out of the cattails right there and seemed to know I was here. He probably heard me setting up. My favorite story of this spot is where we turned off of the human trail and turned into those trees. If we would have went about 10 feet further up and you looked across, you'd have saw there's a cornfield there on the private land. And I came back here one time. It had snowed till about 3 or 4 in the morning. And I thought, well, I'm going to cut a buck track, follow it back to bedding, and set up on him coming out. And I hit a big buck track coming out of that corn. But I knew it was fresh because it had just stopped snowing. And it came down through here, right down here, right towards that island. And, at the time, there was 2 poplar trees like that. I don't know if this is the other one. I think it is. Well, one of the 2, I climbed up with a climber. I went way up as high as I could. And then I turned around to hunt. And I could see the buck bedded on the point looking at me like this. Big rack. And that's one of those turning points back then when I started realizing that you should probably come up the backside of a tree and watch around. Right. That was one of those lessons. But I sat in that tree the whole day staring at that buck, and he sat in that spot staring at me. And other than every now and then looking to the side, he would just put his head right back up and stare at me. And no matter how motionless I was, he never moved until it was black and I got down.
What, do you think you're a raccoon or something?
You wouldn't come in. But it was one of those lessons. But that was a cool hunt, regardless. Anybody got any questions?
I think the coolest part of that is you were quiet enough to get up in that tree without him noticing that you were hunting.
Oh, I think he saw me climbing. I just turned around and looked and he was staring at me. So I'm sure he noticed me climbing. You know, I was trying to be quiet, and I'm sure I was quiet, but you can't climb up something like that high and not have to see you. You know, the cattails are really high and stuff, but you get to Sega Ogre Swamp, in any swamp, any lowland, it's the same thing. It's just you can't see it over the cattails, right? But if you can see the higher points, the different types of trees, the different terrains, the little islands, whether it's in a tamarack swamp or not, whether you can see it through the trees, it's still a spot where the deer are going to be. And if you can read a map well, if you look at an aerial well, you can pick that stuff out and you can go to it. You can still follow those transition lines, you're still going to find the bucks. Doesn't matter where you're at. And when I go to like vast tamarack swamps, the big thing I'll hear is bucks bed everywhere, there's deer everywhere, there's a bed under every tree, I don't know where to hunt. It's just stupid. This whole bed thing's stupid, right? That's what I'll hear a lot. But when I go out there, what I'm finding is you look at that tamarack swamp and there are beds everywhere. And pretty much if you looked around here, you'd probably find beds everywhere too. But those key land features are what hold the big ones. And sometimes it takes a little more work because they're so hidden to find them. But when you find them, you'll find the majority of the bucks are in certain areas of that swamp. It might take a little harder to find them, but you'll still find them locked down in certain areas because they'll have features that maybe even only they know why, because of how they smell the wind and stuff. But there's a swamp that me and Eric hunted quite a bit the last couple of years here. That's 3 miles across. That is mostly tamarack and some big, vast areas of dogwood. And there are beds everywhere. But we were able to lock right into those bucks there too, right?
Yep, they're hugging tight to terrain features like points and that kind of thing. That's where we called our setup.
Yep. So that was my point about stopping. For anybody that didn't get a good look, this is that red rose deer dogwood we're talking about. These are all nipped off.
Happen to know who the guy was? Or
oh yeah.
You knew who he was?
Yeah, he was mad that I killed the buck. It was really just, you know.
That's what I'm saying. So it was just a jerk off thing to do.
He also after I shown that I shot it legally, then he claimed I must have trespassed on his property because I said in the video that I was hunting up adjacent to his property that had food plots on it. And how would I know there's food plots there?
Yeah.
You see them on an aerial map plain as day. Matter of fact, you can see the corn plot from the public, you know. But I get that everywhere. Every time I shoot a big buck, I get that.
I've been hearing a lot more news stories about people getting jealous and doing that. One of the posts I read is if you do shoot a big buck, just call DNR right away.
Yeah. I just hate that whole concept of it. I shouldn't have to do that.
No.
But I do film everything I do. So even if it's just the recovery, you're going to be able to show exactly where it was if it comes down to it. You know? Which isn't fair because it seems like in the hunting world it's prove you're not guilty instead of innocent until proven guilty. It seems like it's the opposite.
Well, that's going the way the world's going.
And a lot of times if you're somebody that's well known, they'll release articles about you being charged even before you're found guilty. So
it's happening with that Alexander buck right
correct.
now. You know,
correct.
Your opinion is your opinion on the kid or what's going on, but it's the burden on the state and on the government to
I don't
find
know
him
what
guilty.
happened with that guy, but I do know that what they're charging with him with, the actual charge, is that he shot a buck on his sister's property without her permission. He didn't write it. She only told him he could. And her sister says he has permission, but in that state you have to have permission in writing. And I wouldn't even know that. I hunted Ohio and I asked permission. I hunted on that property. I didn't get writing. I didn't even know that was the law. But that's what they charge him.
Can that be on the state to say, well, here's your charge? What if the landowner, even without that written permission, says, well, yeah, it's fine, you can hunt this place? Does the state require that in general? I don't know.
Depends how jealous that guy is.
The DA is what it seems
That
like.
DA is really pissed off.
What specifically like about the points, the point that from the deer's perspective that they're really loving?
The points are, it's a safety feature in my mind. Now, I don't know this for a fact, I'm not a deer. But I can tell you, when I look at it, the reason it looks like to me that they bet on those points is because they can monitor danger. When danger comes at a deer bedded on a point, it almost always comes down to point. It's very seldom it comes from any other direction. So in a swamp, when they're bedded on a point, now, let's just say they're bedded on a straight line, okay? And they're bedded on the edge of a transition, right? Danger can come from here, it can come from here, it can come from
So
here.
it comes from one way.
He has to monitor from different directions, right? On a point, it's coming from one direction, right? And if it comes from the swamp, he's gonna hear it for a mile, you know? If you get into hill country in the hills, the reason they take the points in the hill country is because they monitor the wind from over the hill, they monitor the thermals from below, and they got an eyesight vision down the hill. It's even harder to get to them than the points out here. So points kind of limit the ways danger can come at them. It gives them a safety feature.
Must make an escape route easier for them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing too. You can find an incredible spot for a bed. If it don't have an escape route, it's useless. You won't find them bedding on a point. Well, you will occasionally. I won't say never. But it's seldom you'll find a really good buck bedding on a point that goes out into a lake.
You don't know where to go.
Right, because what are they going to do? Jump in the lake and swim across? You kill them, right, while they're swimming. So, at least from their perspective. So, they have to have an escape route. Whenever you find these beds, you will find, like, those beds that come in and out of those points. If you go look at the bed, you'll always see a trail that goes off into nowhere land, which is the escape route as well. For it really hard. Or multiple bucks competing for it. Or it's going on during the rut. Because, not really actually rut, but pre-rut. Like that last week of October, you know, or maybe just into November, because that's when they're just so aggressive, they're rubbing trees constantly. You know, we've actually, you know, about 5 years ago, or maybe 10 now, I discovered something hunting with Mario back in the conservancies. We started seeing how these bucks were bedding in relation to doe bedding, where they had these beds where it was an actual bed, but it was really hard to see, but it was so tore up with rubs, it was crazy. And these bucks would bed monitoring does exiting the bedding areas. And that buck might only bed there 3 or 4 days a year, but it's the same 3 or 4 days. And if you're there the next year, and we start seeing it, and now I'm starting to find those spots all over the place now that I know to look for them, where they monitor these doe bedding areas. And if you hit them at the right days, there's a buck there. But you'll see, at the bed is hard to see. Hard to tell it was bedding there. But man, it rubs there and stuff. And we actually were fortunate enough where Mario sat in the tree and watched that buck get up and rub all those trees. Watched them, you know, monitor the does and see. And then it starts clicking. You know, so one thing that helps us a lot is whenever we see a deer like that, or you see any deer, we go out and in the springtime, this time of the year, we go back and see where that deer came from that we saw from the stand. We don't do it during hunting season, obviously, but after hunting season, we'll go back, we'll backtrack. Where did he come from? Why was he there? What was he doing? And then we'll try to learn from that. And that's one of those cases where we were able to go back, see where the rubs were, see where he was sitting, and then started relating that to other spots and finding more of that. But there's reasons they bed in spots. And it's food, it's does, it's water, it's convenience, it's pressure. There's different things that put them in different areas. And the more of that you can put together, the more you can put down an exact time frame when a deer was there.
I was shocked that you said you killed the Roman legend right here, because on the video, when you watch it,
To me from the beginning was when I'd come up here, this spot right where we're standing, all these trees would just be ripped up with rubs on years when the oaks are dropping, when these acorns are dropping, which they didn't very well last year, which you see the rubs aren't opened up, right? So probably about every other year I walk up here and these rubs are open, but if you look around, you'll see there's historical ones everywhere. Right here. This would be really rubbed up on years the acorns drop. So that told me that those bucks were bedding down there in early season, which was fairly accurate. I mean, we had some run-ins with some pretty good bucks down there in early season. But it wasn't until I ran a camera down there doing that bed study that I figured out I was wrong. Not wrong, but it was also a really good time during the rut. And they're not necessarily rubbing under the oak trees during the rut, so there wouldn't be sign up here. So even on years that there wasn't sign up here, that was still good during the rut. So 2 seasons ago, me and Rick ran a cell cam down there, and we had days where like 13 days, 7 of them there was a buck bedded there that was a shooter in a row. Nice 10-pointer. It was bedded there constantly. And there was other big bucks. And I hunted down there several times and had a lot of bucks go past me during rut. So it changed my whole philosophy, just running the camera there 1 year per season. The year before we put the cell cam there, somebody I know put a regular camera down there, and that regular camera, he didn't touch it the whole year. And there was a period of rut where in rut where like out of 14 days, there's only 2 days you wouldn't have shot a buck, and that's to say that the camera didn't pick them up. They might have been there and the camera didn't pick them up. But once you hunt it, I think you make an interference there. But you start to learn there's certain time periods when spots are hot, you know what I mean? And this is one of them. It's kind of a unique point because this one, it tapers down into those cattails, but it drops off kind of immediately when it hits the water. There isn't any bedding past that point. Occasionally, I think they bed along the river. There's some high spots and still come up through there. I think you walked in there, didn't you? So there's some bed on the
From down
on
there.
the rim.
I didn't see a lot, but I only took, one straight line path when we were driving, so.
I think there's some beds in there, but not a lot. Most of them are right on the point. And when I've hunted in there, those deer get off right off the point. But it's a really good point, and it's one of those areas that's got specific time frames. Pre-rut and early season. The first week of the season and pre-rut. And I've never really seen a lot of pressure there. Occasionally I'll see a guy down there. The other year when me and Rick ran that camera for a whole season, one day I saw a guy walking in front of the camera. And it was a gun hunter just walking. And it looked like he looked at the camera, turned around and left. So that was the only, during the whole season, interaction we had with a person on there. But that season that we hunted, a kid hunted up here because of all the rubs and shot a doe here. You like that story, didn't you?
Well, it's funny the way you explained it, but he went running all the way back to the vehicle with that thing on his shoulder to show his girlfriend.
So, he put the deer on his shoulder, and literally the deer ran all over the parking lot. His bow was standing and everything. But he was a young guy, probably like 17 or 16 or something. His girlfriend dropped him off and was picking him up. And he couldn't wait to show her his doe he shot. He had it on his shoulder.
I mean, I think it was his first deer or something.
It was,
like that.
yeah. I stopped and talked to him, congratulated him. In the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I hope you don't camp out there. So I never did see him again.
But he shot the doe that was hot.
Yeah, he
that
did.
was with your buck.
That was the doe that was driving the buck. Because that's what happened with that being such a good rut spot, is there's does that fed there a lot later in the season. So even on our camera, we were picking up that doe group quite a bit, and then we watched the buck show up.
So on my Onyx, I pinned that island out there, not this point coming off the main island. So what would make this better than out there? Or is
Not a lot. They're both great.
Okay.
Guess where we go next?
Yeah. So I mean, that's basically what we're doing, is hopping features. And I did notice a couple of times when I was out here, the bucks came from that island. Especially the younger ones that would get that far in daylight.
Now, if you were to hunt your way into this, okay, great terrain feature, island out there, if you're hunting your way out to there, unless there's something telling you to get straight out there.
What I've done in the past is walk up here and see if the rubs are active. But nowadays I probably just hunt it. But I don't have to hunt this first or second.
Okay.
I mean, I can get into that island without exposing this. Matter of fact, people walk through here all the time, because when people come to an island like this, or any land body, they don't walk the way we did. They tend to follow the land features because they don't want to get lost. So they walk in circles. So you'll see dog walkers and stuff walking around the rim of this island quite a bit. So this place gets a lot of pressure, but I come in a different way to get to the island. I come in from way over there.
It can get real thick in here too. First night I walked out of here, I was walking the edge because I didn't know where I was.
Dan, do you think this point might be good because of the way those oaks are sitting right over the top of the bedding? I mean, they got to move 10 feet.
It could be.
You know.
Could be. We'll kind of get into that when we get down there. So what I want to do is walk down there, walk the deer trails back to the bedding, look at the actual deer beds. I kind of want you to see them because I just told you how good of a spot this is and how many deer I was seeing here, right? And I want you to see how those beds don't really glow that much. They don't really look like what I just described, what the deer were there. They were bedding there and they come out of those beds. So I want you to see what I'm looking at so that when you see it, you won't brush it off when you see it. So we'll look at the beds. It's going to get kind of tight down there, so we'll have to go in a line portion fashion when we get by the beds. And I'll just yell out where they are, and when you get to that spot, you can kind of check it out. And then we'll go from the beds. When we get to the last bed, we'll come out, following the deer trail out to a point where I would set up. And we'll look at my setup tree and how I hunt that. Sound good?
Yeah.
So this is that point he's talking about.
Lock it in. A lot of times you have like tapering spots that it can bed back into the brush that actually make the spots feel better. And this spot too, unlike the first point we looked at, is kind of windward. So bucks do want to kind of bed up onto the land a little bit and monitor this point for danger coming down. Now you think about it, I mean, literally, if you were out here and there's people out here looking to get you, this wouldn't be a bad spot to sit, because where are they going to come from? Right down this trail. You know where they're coming from. You just jump in and take off, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to walk this trail in here and get into the beds over in here. And they used to be right on the point quite a bit, but the ashes died and they made it kind of open. So there's still some beds there, but the better bucks have been bedding over here where that dogwood is and the thicker brush over here into that tangle. and then coming out on a trail that's along that edge. And sometimes they come out on this trail too. So, walking like this, this should be the main spot when they're bedded. Now this is the bed here.
Right where you were just stepping.
Yeah, right there. You tell the match for that. Here, this thing gonna fell down into it. There's one right there. One right here.
Here.
There's a little wrong for the small box.
A couple beds in there.
Maybe right there.
Here's a bed in here. Here's a rub here that was this side looks pretty good, a little better of a rub. Right where these beds are. This is probably the best bedding right in here. I can see some good rubs over there. So this whole little tangle here is where the beds are going to be. Right here. There's only, you know, when you come in here and you see these rubs, you got to think to yourself, why is a buck in here and why would he be rubbing in here? I mean, is there a cornfield here? Is there, you know, is it a ridge he can walk to get one place to another? The only reason he would be in here is to bed. So this is what I'm seeing is these beds, and I can tell you this: they even look worse now than they did 3 weeks ago when I walked in here. So the longer you get away from that snow melt, the more that sign fades away. You know what I mean? But this is it, and I can tell you that there was good bucks bedded here this season, coming in and out of here. And one thing that's interesting to me is when you look at these rubs, the few rubs we got have been a little higher, and it looks like a good buck. Usually this is a little more torn up, and I tend to believe that on years that it's less torn up, it can be that there's just a bigger buck that nobody wants to tangle with. Because there's lots of 2-year-olds around here. There ain't a lot of 3, 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. You know, when you put a bigger buck in an area, then the smaller ones don't mark it. The competition that you get is usually with 2-year-olds. Like when I find bedding areas that are just tore up with smaller but decent rubs, it's usually that there's a whole bunch of 2-year-olds competing for that area. And it's not something I want to look at. Those tore up ones. Usually when there's a mature buck there on public land, he doesn't have much competition, and then it's not tore up. But the opposite happens if I get onto private managed land, like when I go scout people's properties for them, and it's a really good property that has, say, 5, 6 mature bucks. The good bedding areas will be tore up with rubs because those mature bucks are fighting over them. You know, so you can find an area that doesn't have many rubs, but what you want to see is a few. You'd like to see a few big ones coming in and out of here. This doesn't turn me on a lot, but if I see something coming out of here around the corner or something on these trails, then I might say, okay, maybe there's something really big. And I do know that there's a 3-year-old 10-pointer here last year. So, did he mature? No.
When you were putting the cell cams up to monitor this, were you just putting them like over there where you could see a little better?
When we get back to where I hunt, I'll show you where we have it.
Okay. We're on the exit trail right now.
There, it's still a little green. But even this one is from this season here. When we put the cell cam here, we put it right here, and aimed it down here. And at that time, right where Rick is, there was a huge rub. And you can see it scarring. And there was a bed behind it that was just a cave. And we kind of aimed it at that bed. We came back here, what was it, like July, August, something like that?
I think it was like mid-August. We thought people being out here.
Yeah. Did you want to get out here as early as possible? And I thought, you know, you're probably kind of ruining the spot a little bit coming out this late.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get this monitored for the season, right? So what we found is there was really a doe bedding in there, and that's why all this rubbing's going on here. And continually through the season, that doe was bed right in here. Probably kicking out as we walk in when we hunt. So when we used to think that they were just coming out for the acorns, Mario hunted here one time, and he hunted down in here someplace, one of these side trees, because of the way the wind was, I think. And he had the deer come out, but they didn't come out for those beds. Well, they got up early. By the time they got here, it was too late to shoot. Anybody guess why? Eric alluded to it earlier.
Right here, it was too late.
What are we, 50 yards from bed?
He set up too far away.
There's oaks back there.
Correct. They got up 800 those oaks before it was dark. Before they came out. And that's just something I can't do. I can't get to the last oak spot. We had some good confrontations here, like I said. I sat here, I saw quite a few bucks that I passed, even some good ones. One of them I probably should have shot, but like Rick said, I don't like to shoot them off film. That is the tree I hunted on right there. And I don't see it now, but I think somebody came back here and hunted in there after I did, after I put that hunt on film. And then there was a spruce step left that somebody forgot in there. I don't see it now though.
Tree right there.
Yeah, right there. Actually, I think maybe it's a straight one, that's right. One of those two.
The one behind it?
Yeah. So that's where I hunted, where I did monitor this area and get as close as I could. I think if I got here, I'd probably spook them. But I could get into there relatively quiet in this high grass, just by coming in off that hill slow, coming down here, getting early enough. And what do you think that is? How many yards? 50? 50? 60 yards? I think that's a good setup.
I think it's 52.5.
52.5.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Yep. Correct. So you gotta imagine it's a wall of cover. And one good thing you have that you turn a bad thing into a good thing is that thick brush back in there. That's buckthorn. That's what I was talking about earlier. It's starting to take over. It's a bad thing because eventually that'll be the whole forest. It'll kill out all the other trees. That stuff just takes over. It grows in the understory, so it'll grow under the oak trees and stuff, and then the little oak trees can't shoot up. But anywho, that stuff holds leaves longer than almost all the other trees. And they're dark green and they just block everything. And you have a wall of cover there.
The only way they can see you is with their ears.
Correct. So it's just a matter of not making a noise. So I'm even able to hunt fairly high. They can't see through the cover. So one thing I would look for is not a dead calm day to hunt here. I wouldn't want that. I'd want to have a little bit of wind noise or something.
Would you get like almost consider like just kind of sitting on the ground?
What's that?
Just consider sitting on the ground right here.
You'd have a hard time killing them on the ground.
Yeah.
You got grass and stuff that's high and brush and stuff, and any little movement, and then you don't hear them coming or see them coming, and all of a sudden they're in front of you and you just moved. And
Yeah.
I don't do well off the ground. I only hunt off the ground if I have to.
Yeah.
And in here I don't have to. I can get elevated. So I'm not. I think it was that second tree, not that one, but that one over there is the one I think I sat in. Yeah, I'm sure of it. And you know, the trouble is every time I film a hunt, people will show up in that spot, and there was a spruce step in there after I hunted her. But anybody got any questions about this or about hunting this close? Or?
Your height is just above the top of the bushes when you go.
I got up fairly high. I got up about 18 feet.
Okay.
I didn't want them to be looking at me, so if I can, 18 feet is about my favorite height.
I'm looking at it now, 18 feet.
You like cattails, Steve?
Yeah, that's just basically the sun out there.
Yeah. Boy, some of these suckers are huge. Pretty cool.
So that was, if you followed that story, that was 2 seasons I hunted. What we did is, me and Rick came back here in July because it was almost impossible to get back here. This is the best way to get back here that we just walked, which you see isn't fun. But I'd have to walk right through the bedding, right over there. So what we did is we came off of that woodlot over there, that island, and there were no trails coming out here, and it was really thick, hard to navigate, and the water's kind of over your boots. So we took machetes. We went in about 20 yards where somebody wouldn't see what we did, and cut a trail in a straight line along the edge of the property line, and around the corner of it. We came into the woodlot over there, and then moved around. So then that took us, pretty much a full weekend, didn't it?
Yeah, 2 days.
It almost killed me. I almost had heat exhaustion.
Yeah, I got him laying on the ground doing this.
Knowing he was in here.
Yeah, exactly. So then
July.
the first time I hunted, I knew this brush loses its leaves in mid-October. So the fact that was just completely full of rubs and beds, and knowing that a buck was not going to bed there in the blazing sun when those leaves are gone, they just moved to the cattails. That told me that all those beds were being used in September. So that number of beds and that amount of sign in September told me that there's usually a buck there in September. And knowing the buck that was running around here, I really wanted to hunt it. So I followed the trail back straight to that point and set up over there. And then when I hunted this the first time, I was waiting for a north wind, and which is the opposite of what we have now. North wind blowing straight that way, and a brisk north wind. The reason brisk is because I got to make some noise in the cattails and the wet stuff. So first strong north wind we had was about 5 days in the season. I went around, got to that tree, and when I got set up, about a half an hour later, a doe, well, fawn, got up 15 yards from me, bedded right beside me, stood up and started feeding. Then the mom stood up on the end of the point, this end of the point, and started feeding. And the mom started coming right underneath me. And while she's coming, I started hearing the cattails coming from this stuff. Couldn't see it. You could hear it coming down the trail, slurping and walking through the cattails. And that doe's getting closer and closer. You hear the buck coming, which I'm assuming is the buck. I can't see him. But she gets right underneath me, and I'm not very high up. And she looks over and sees a stick on the tree. And, I mean, that's her bedroom. She knows there's something different, right? She stares at it, looks at the next one, looks at the next one, looks at me, and goes, "Oh!" And jumps out into the marsh for the fawn, runs around back to the point, and just starts blowing.
I remember that video.
And you just hear that buck just stop, you know. And then finally she leaves, but she blew like 20, 30 times. And then I could hear the buck moving through the cattails that way. So just to keep it honest, because that buck didn't know I was there, he just knew somebody was blowing. The next day I hunted again. Nothing showed up, which is what I expected, but I had to try. And then I did something that most of you guys probably wouldn't do. I stayed the hell away from it. I didn't go back the whole rest of the year because I didn't want to have that continual scent there and that continual danger and have them know that that's a spot where people go where there's danger. So I stayed out of there. Even though I wanted to hunt it, I knew better. The very next year, right in early September, same time frame, I waited for the very first time. I had a brisk north wind, which was 5 days into the season. I did the same trek, same trail, walked around, sat in the same tree. One major difference, those does didn't get up. There's no does around me. And same time frame, walked out here, walked right over underneath me and shot. I found this right here. Look at. I found that there was a good buck bedding in here. All this red brush was tore up, and you can see some of them tore up higher and broken off higher up, and there was a lot of it. And I knew that buck was living out here, right out here.
So that's pretty interesting to me that you didn't know.
If you found anything you liked in this video, please share, like, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that bell. I really appreciate it. Thank you.